What's up, everyone? Thank you for tuning in to the Narrow Road Podcast, a place to have honest conversations about walking in faith. I am your host, Manny Vera, and today is our first episode. I figured I would actually share my testimony because I'm pretty sure there's a lot of you guys that don't know me or my story on how I actually came to faith and finding Christ. Um, I have been saved for since I want to say 2022. Yes, February 2022. Um, to give you a little backstory about myself, I am a husband and a father of two beautiful children, with a third on the way. Yeah, prior to coming to faith, let's see. I was actually raised Catholic. Um, and even being raised Catholic, coming from like a Hispanic household, it was more of a checklist when it came to God and living as a believer in Christ, which again, when I was growing up, it felt more like you did your communion, you did your confirmation. You only really attended church when you had to do those, or if it was Easter or Ash Wednesday, right? And I'm pretty sure that might be a few of us, and there's no condemnation on that. Again, that was just kind of how I was raised, and I don't blame my mom for it at all because that's how she was raised. Um, it wasn't God wasn't a centerpiece in the household. Everyone believed in God or believed that there was a higher being, but it wasn't really, I want to say, modeled or preached to us in a way that we feared God, and not out of wrath, but feared God because of how much He loved us. Um, so growing up, I had a bit of a rough life. I have three younger brothers, and my mom was, in a way, a single mother or a single parent. Our father was really in and out of our life, and we had certain individuals that we were able to look up to as father figures. We had our grandfather, obviously our uncles and whatnot, but to have a dominant male role model that was leading the family within our household, it was really absent. And our mother raising four young boys had to be both mother and father. So it came with a lot of struggle, and it was more of her trying to make sure that we didn't end up walking the same path that our father was walking. Um, we grew up with our grandparents, which gave us some stability, but again, there was still the absence of God. And for me, as I was growing up, again, I had certain individuals, certain role models in my life that I was able to pretty much like look up to, and I I cherish every moment that I had with each one of my uncles, my grandfather, because they helped build me to the man I am today. Um, as far as like my work ethic and just like going after certain things in life. As a teenager, though, is when I really hit um, a rebellious stage. And I think part of it was, again, my father being in and out of our lives with certain vacations, we'll say, that he was on. And then when he wasn't on them, uh, he was still absent in the household. And I seen the kind of attention that he was drawing from my mother, and I figured, well, if he's drawing the attention of my mom, I can rebel as well, because that's the attention that I want from her. And again, it wasn't that I'm not bashing my mother. We have a great relationship, but growing up, again, because she had to be both mother and father in our household, there was a lot of absence as far as certain emotions that we weren't able to build on, such as having love and care inside the household. It was more of survival because she had to provide, and in the circumstances that she had. So dealing with certain kind of like abandonment issues, I had looked to other means to fill that void. And one of the things that I fell into was alcohol at a very young age. I want to say I was probably maybe 12 or 13 when I first started drinking alcohol. It started off as kind of like a nothing major, where it was like, it wasn't taboo in a way, because I was able to drink around family. And the thing that was said was like, I'd rather have you drink in front of us, than out with a stranger. And it wasn't my mom condoning my drinking. She actually didn't know that I was drinking at such a young age. But it really started sinking into me. I was developing habits that no one in my family knew. When I would feel, again, the abandonment that I was getting from my father, not feeling worthy, that drinking helped mask it, or it helped me cope with that feeling. Where as I started drinking, I didn't feel those emotions of abandonment. I felt like I was in a crowd that wanted me. And I feel like that's a lot of people when it comes to drinking. As I grew up more in my teenage years, I started turning more towards street and gangs. And it's not that I fell into the gang life, but I started seeing that I was associating myself more and more with that type of mentality, those kind of people. And again, broken people love broken people. And that was me kind of feeling my sense of community. And I started drinking heavier because of certain circumstances, as far as like losing friends at a young age, and I started falling into drugs. Of course, it started off with minor, just like marijuana usage, but essentially ended up getting into harder drugs. Really started developing a habit of taking prescription pills and cocaine as I grew up. And I ended up DJing, actually. Got into DJing around 18 with my uncle. And that type of lifestyle, because it's long hours, you're DJing at night, and it's more of a party vibe, obviously it fed into my addictions. I was able to drink and not feel any type of condemnation, like any type of like, oh dude, you're getting wasted and you're DJing. And I held it together somewhat, but always towards like the later end of the night, I would be completely blacked out. And there's times that I stopped drinking cold turkey, but continue to fall off the wagon. And I met my wife actually DJing at a party once, and we exchanged numbers and we started hanging out, and grew to know each other more, and eventually got married. Well, we had our son and got married, and I started to calm down. I wasn't completely sober, but I did start calming down. And we were growing up, still drinking, still my occasional cocaine usage, um, and we ended up having our daughter. And as time went on, I started. I would drink to the point where I was masking so many different emotions, where the abandonment was there, but I started feeling more and more depressed because I wasn't going anywhere. I felt like I was just like on that hamster wheel. And right before COVID actually hit is when I started really declining, and emotionally and spiritually. I had lost my godmother. She had was battling health issues for a long time, and she had passed right before COVID, and it really affected me hard because she was one person that I was really connected to as far as a family member on my father's side. Um, I remember that there was times where she would pick me up during summer break, and I'd be at her house for 2 weeks and just hanging out with my cousins and just hanging out with my aunt. And it was it was a lot of fun. So I had a lot of love for her. And when she passed, my godfather actually came up to me and asked me to be one of the pallbearers, and also gave a eulogy at the funeral. But his one condition was, I can't have you cry. Like, you have to hold it together. You need to be up there and be strong for her. And I feel like that's a lot that happens for men, where we constantly bottle our emotions. We bottle our emotions to not feel weak, to live in like this world standard of like men don't cry, men have to be strong. And don't get me wrong, I'm an emotional guy. I cry and I laugh, but when it came to that one stipulation that my uncle gave me, I didn't cry and I held it in. And it actually did more harm for me by doing that. Um, Again, she had passed right before COVID hit here in the States. And when COVID hit, I had already felt isolated, even though people were around me. But when we had to bend the curve and stay at home, that's when I really started feeling depressed. I actually had stopped drinking um, due to blacking out and fighting with my brothers, and I felt bad, so I was just like, I have to stop drinking. And thankfully I had stopped right before the shutdown happened, but again, I was dealing with a lot of demons inside, and I sobered up for about 5 months, I want to say. And right when they kind of opened everything back up, I fell off the wagon, and I started seeing how everything was kind of repeating, where I was masking my emotions. I wasn't opening up to my wife on how I was feeling, what I was feeling, And it started really affecting relationships from obviously my marriage, but also friendships, um, family relationships, um, my work life, and it affected obviously me and my children, how I was fathering them. And give me a second. Sorry. Um, but I ended up again. I would sober up and I would fall off. I would sober up and then fall off, and finally, I want to say right before I hit rock bottom, I was I was always drinking, and I remember my wife constantly saying like, "You can't keep drinking like this because I have to take care of you." And I would always remember telling her, "I can count on my hands how many times you have had to take care of me because I've blacked out." And I was being arrogant and cocky and prideful. And I started realizing that it was actually becoming a habit where she was taking care of me Fridays, Saturdays, Sundays. And my son started seeing it more because, I mean, obviously he was getting older, and he's 11 now. So he was 8, 9 years old, starting to see me being blacked out all the time. And it was, it was Super Bowl Sunday, and I ended up having family over, and we were drinking, and I blacked out. And I blacked out to the point where I didn't realize that I was arguing with my family, arguing with the wife. She had to take care of me again. And I ended up waking up the next morning, and it was Valentine's Day. I woke up late, didn't go into work, and I stood in bed the entire day. And hit it finally started really hitting me. And me and the wife don't really like celebrating holidays or these Hallmark holidays. We'll try to go out the week before, especially for Valentine's Day, or the week after. And I had I was feeling like crap. And I remember my brother talking to me, and he was like, "Dude," he's like, "just smoke." He's like, "Level out, you'll be straight." So I ended up smoking that night, and we all go to sleep. And I'm up past midnight, just sitting in bed. I couldn't go to sleep. I was having just like, I was battling a lot of thoughts. And God finally came to me and pretty much showed me my life if I continued down that road. The road of drinking, the road of drugs. And I ended up seeing me in the gutter and my wife and our kids having a better life without me. And I realized that I was becoming the man that I didn't want to become. I was becoming the man that I had witnessed as my childhood, in my childhood years. So prior to that, a few like months leading up to that, my wife she kept talking to me saying like, "I want to go to church. I want to go to church." And I kept telling her, I was like, "Go to church. I don't need to go. You go to church." And I would always say like, "I don't need to go to church to know God." And again, being raised Catholic, I never had the relationship with God. I knew the religion, but I didn't have the relationship. And I think a part of it was having that abandonment from my father, and then going into like the Catholic Church. it felt like it was like I wasn't worthy of my father's time. And then when I went into church, it was always, you're a sinner, you're a sinner. So I didn't feel like like I wasn't worthy of God's love. So I was really turned away from God and church and the whole aspect of it. I actually like went into a new age living where I was like doing Zen and positive, like be positive, you'll get positive, be one with the universe, rocks and crystals and whatnot. And again, I had all those issues still that I was dealing with: abandonment, drugs, addiction, anger, unworthiness. So that night when God finally came to me, it was a rude awakening in a way. I remember going to work and calling my wife during lunch and telling her, like, hey, I need you to find out what church your sister and brother-in-law go to, because I feel like I need to be in church right now. And I didn't tell her what I had, like how God came to me the night prior. Um, the days leading up to going to church, I I actually I woke up that Sunday morning and I jumped on Yelp and Google and I typed up the church, and I was trying to look for reviews to not go. And I remember telling my wife, like, "Oh, this is what people were saying about this church." And she said, "Are you really looking up reviews on God?" And I was like, it kind of was like, it was like almost like a smack to the face. And ended up getting in the car and driving over. My brother-in-law met us out front, helped us in, and it was different because again, I was raised Catholic and walking into a Christian church, and I was just like, I don't know how this is going to be. I mean, the only Christians that I've ever seen was on TV growing up. And I remember whenever like the TV Christians were on, people were jumping up, shouting, and again, my family would just point and kind of laugh and just be like, look at these crackheads, look at they're going crazy, and they're just acting a fool. And I kind of had that in the back of my head as like, oh, this is what a Christian church is going to be. And it was complete opposite, and I hadn't even stepped inside the church. I mean, I was pulling up and people were greeting me, asking me how I was doing. Um, and when I finally walked into service, we were sitting there and worship came on. And again, I didn't know any of the worship songs. I know that the lyrics were up there, but I was just like, I'm not going to sing. I'm not doing that. And as the worship team started leading, all of a sudden I just felt warmth come over me. And I just started breaking down crying. And I tried to hold it together, sat down, and then the pastor comes up and gives us the message. And I felt like it was everything that I was going through. Everything, like all the anger, all the abandonment, everything that I had dealt with growing up, I felt like that message was directly for me. And he ends the message, worship comes back out, and they sing again, and I'm breaking down crying. And it actually took me about 5 or 10 minutes after service to kind of compose myself before walking out. And it instantly felt like I found a home. Like everything that I was searching for as a child, as a teenager, and even in my early 20s, from everything that I was searching for, from like drugs, alcohol, the street life, party life, all of those things that I was trying to use could never fill that void. And I finally felt like that void was filled when I went into church. And I remember just thanking my brother-in-law and sister-in-law the entire time. And we ended up leaving, and the kids, my two kids actually, like, they were super excited. They were just all like, "Are we coming back? Do we get to come back tomorrow?" And they fell in love with the church. And it was fun because I felt love finally. It finally felt like love was within me, and I didn't feel condemnation. I didn't feel that it was like, "Oh, you're not worthy." It was more of like, "No, we know you're broken, and God still loves you." And we've been in church ever since, and I've been clean and sober for the last almost 2.5 years, which has been completely awesome because, especially in my family, it's kind of unheard of to be sober this long and to pretty much have like a 180 in lifestyle. So growing going to church, um seeing all the healing that was happening within me, seeing all the healing that was happening within our family. um I I remember, like, I wanted to soak up more of God. I wanted to know God more, and finally started reading the Bible. And then we were introduced to the TV show, The Chosen, and me, the wife, the kids loved it, and we started watching it more and more. And one of the last seasons that had dropped, it was in theaters, and I remember myself, my wife, and my mom, we all went to go watch it. And I felt like the very beginning, it was the Sermon on the Mount, instantly hit me. And as me and my wife left the theaters, I was hearing God talk to me the entire time, where it was all the anger and hatred that I had for my father, because I was seeing how much love I was pouring into my kids, and it was the love that I wanted from him that I never got. And I started realizing that or he was battling his own demons during that time. And I ended up knowing where he was at. I actually hadn't talked to him in well over, I mean, it was years. And I remember going up to the house, and pulling him outside, and he was in complete shock. And I apologized. I apologized for everything that I did, um, everything that I guess I didn't live up to as a son. And then I forgave him and prayed over him. And it was a huge weight that was just lifted off of my shoulders. Prayed for him, asked for blessings, and just for him to have an encounter with God. And we said our piece and goodbye. But it was nice to see how God was starting to develop me more and more and heal a lot of wounds that I was carrying. Um, so yeah, man, it's been quite a journey as far as where I've come from. Again, I've been clean and sober for almost 2.5 years. I'm plugged in to my church. When I said that I wanted to grow more and know God more, um, it was how I ended up growing more was actually 6 months in me being sober. I started realizing that the life that I was once living, wasn't going to line up with living for God. And I started like not getting phone calls or invites. And I felt like it was more like the devil was talking to me saying like, oh, see, you can have one drink. You can just like, if you want to hang out with people, you have to at least have one drink. And I didn't want to go back to that. And what was it? I remember telling my pastor, telling my wife and my mom like what I was struggling with. Um, and it was finally I was giving the enemy too much credit. Because like the Bible says, when God created Adam, God knew that it was bad for man to be alone and created woman. And it's more than just man and woman, it's more of community. As humans, we're not meant to live life by ourselves. We're meant to be in a community, and depending on what community you're in, can obviously lead you in different ways in life. Um, I had opened up about me struggling with my addictions, and for a while it was when I first said that I wasn't drinking, there was like it was jokes from family and friends of like, oh, in a way like they've seen it before. They've seen me not drink and then fall off the wagon. But when they seen that I completely did a 180, there was so much more support. There was so much more support from family. There was so much more support from friends where I was able to start hanging out with them again. And if someone were to offer me a drink, family would step in and be like, no, he doesn't drink. My brother doesn't drink, or my cousin doesn't drink. And it felt nice because I was surrounding myself again with community. And it was, I was seeing how, like, if I would have just stood by myself, that's what the enemy would have wanted. And as I opened up with that about my addictions, I felt strength to overcome it more. And growing closer to Christ, that's when I realized that not only do I need my family, but I actually need church. I need a church community. And that's how I actually started serving more, started volunteering to help out at the local church, at during services, during events. And I've seen the growth in what has happened when I've started serving, and how much sharing my testimony during that time has helped others share theirs. So I guess I want to close more with sharing your testimony. And it doesn't really matter if it's a testimony as raw as mine, as far as addiction and a hurtful childhood. I mean, it could be anything. Your testimony, God will use your testimony for anyone. You never know who you're going to touch, who God will touch by you using your testimony on how God has saved you or how God has helped you overcome something. It could be even a testimony as, just waking up and having a house. I mean, if you've come from a place where you never had a stable household and you're now having a stable household every single day, that's a testimony in itself. Breaking generational curses is a testimony in itself. So I would encourage you, those of you that are watching, regardless on how big, how small your testimony is, it's worth sharing. So yeah, if If y'all could do anything at all, I would say share this video. If you guys could subscribe to this channel, what I would like to do is once we hit 50 subscribers, I would like to get on a live prayer call. For those that want to join in, I'll be doing it every second Thursday of the month for a live prayer call. And you could be expecting episodes every first and third Thursday of the month. So again, if you could subscribe, share it, and we'll be talking soon. Thank you guys for watching. Shalom and God bless.